Hi, welcome back to my channel. As you can see, today's study is called Incest, the wickedness of Abram and Sarah. Now, in the law of Moses, it speaks about if an individual committed incest. And a lot of times when you read the statutes of Moses, you would think that it's referring to yourself, or you try to apply these things to yourself, but really these are prophetic precepts and statutes and judgments. So you have to look at them with a prophetic eye. Prophecy is being able to see things in the past, being able to see things in the present, and being able to see things in the future. Okay? So let's look at the wickedness of Abram and Sarah. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 17, this is what it says. And if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, and she see his nakedness, it is a wicked thing, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. He have uncovered his sister's nakedness, he shall bear his iniquity. Now, we know Abram and Sarah were half brothers and sisters. Because if we read Genesis chapter 20, verse 12, this is what Abraham said. He said, and yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. Okay, so right here, Abraham confesses that Sarah was his sister. Okay, this was his father had another woman. And this is how Abraham and Sarah became brother and sister. Okay, so they was half brother and sister. But what does this law says? Moses says, if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter. So right here, Abraham just said, she is the daughter of my father. Okay? What does it say? It says it is a wicked thing. Okay? Now we know also it says here, it says, if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, and she see his nakedness, it is a wicked thing. Now we know that Abraham and Sarah saw each other's nakedness. How do we know this? Because they tried to have a child. They tried to have a child, but the Lord closed up Sarah's womb. And it's a reason why he closed up Sarah's womb, because they were brother and sister. They were brother and sister. God knew it was incest. So he closed up the womb of Sarah until, okay, follow me, because a lot of people going to say, well, they eventually had a son. They eventually had Isaac. They had Isaac after the Lord changed their names, because they were not looked upon as the same old Abram and Sarah or Sarai. They had became new creatures. Their old sins were cleansed. Their sins was taken away. But this is why they did not have that child, because it was considered incest. So God closed the womb of Sarai, or you could say Sarah. Okay, he closed the womb of Sarah so they wouldn't have that child, because he knew it was incest. Now here's the very important thing in this statute prophecy. Moses says, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. Okay, he have uncovered his sister's nakedness, he shall bear his iniquity. Now, so according to this statute, because Abraham married his sister, this was called a wicked thing. And the judgment upon him was that he had to be cut off from his people, and he shall bear his iniquity. This is what happened to Abraham. Read with me. This precept is referring to Abram and his wife Sarah. Abram and Sarah were half brother and sister. This wicked act in the sight of God is the reason why Abram was cut off from his people. Therefore, God kicked Abram out of his father's house and the land of his nativity. This is also why Abram was not able to return unto the land and had to send his servant instead to find a wife for his son Isaac. The Lord did not say, come out the land, but he said, get out the land. This is the reason why God gave Abram the covenant of circumcision. The circumcision represented Abram being cut off from his flesh and blood. Okay, now I just said a lot right there. So according to Leviticus chapter 20 verse 17, it says if a man marries his father's daughter, if he takes his sister, it is a wicked thing, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. This is what happened to Abraham. He was cut off from his people. This is why in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, and the Lord said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. He didn't tell Abraham, come out. He told Abraham to get out. Abraham was kicked out of the land because he married his sister. Okay? This is why God gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision. The circumcision represented Abram being cut off from his own flesh and blood. This is why Moses used those words, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. This is why Moses used those words, cut off, because Abraham and Sarah were cut off from their people. This is why Abraham could not go back into the land and find a wife for his son Isaac. He had to send his servant into the land to find a wife because he was cut off. He could not go back into that land. Okay? So now we have an understanding of why Moses says this in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 17. Abram was cut off from his own flesh and blood. That's the true meaning of the covenant of circumcision. But then it also says this, he shall bear his iniquity. Okay? Now read this with me, bearing burden. Along with being cut off, Abram had to bear his burden. This is why Abram had to wander down into the land of Ham. Okay? Abram was then given the name Ham because he was now dwelling in the land of Ham. Abram went from a high estate unto a low estate. This is bearing a burden, for a burden weighs you down. As you see here, we got the three sons of Noah, Seth, Japheth, and Ham. Seth's seed represents the high class. Japheth's seed represents the middle class. Then Ham's seed represents the low class. So Abraham was of the high seed. He was of the high class. But because of his wickedness, he was brought down to the low class. He was brought down into the land of Ham. Okay? But this is also why Abram was given the name Ham. because he was now dwelling in the land of Ham. The same way us Africans, right? Yes, we may be from Africa, but now being part of America, we have the identity, we identify as African American. Okay? So Abram now identified in the land of Ham. So he was given the name Ham, Abraham. Okay? So he was brought down from a higher state to a lower state. Now, if you know anything about the different social economic class, many people that were of the high class, they usually didn't allow their children to make the decision of who they was going to marry. A lot of time, if you had wealth and you had fame and you had a respectable name, you did not allow your children to marry whoever they wanted to marry. Okay, the parents would arrange marriages for their children. And this is why Abraham said that Sarah was given unto him as a wife. Genesis chapter 20, verse 12, he says, and she became my wife. See, a lot of times what happens is the parents will cause the son and the daughter to marry so they can keep their wealth within their family, so they can keep that prosperity within their family. Because if the son went off and married somebody that they consider less than them or inferior than them, then that wealth would have to transfer to that inferior family. So in order to keep their wealth intact, they married within their families. They committed incest. And according to the law, this was considered a wicked thing. So God had to cast Abraham out from his family so he wouldn't retain that same mind state, because that's what his family was into. This is what wealthy families did. They married within their families to keep that wealth, to keep that name intact. But according to the Lord, this was wickedness. Okay? Now, last part. Just as Abraham was cut off from his old homeland, so has the seed of Abraham of today been cut off from their original land and have been made lowly amongst the nations. We shouldn't look back to our land, but a heavenly new world, but a heavenly new world country that God has prepared for us. So us being as the children or the seed of Abraham, we have been cut off from our own land the same way Abraham was cut off. And now we dwelling in this foreign land. We don't really have our identity. We kind of know who we are, but we don't really know where we originate from. We don't know what part of Africa we're from. Okay? So we shouldn't look back to Africa, right? Abraham didn't go back into his old land. And I really doubt that we're going back into our old land. I really believe what's going to happen is there's a new world that we look forward to. There's a heavenly world that we look forward to. Okay? Now it might happen. Some of us may return back into Africa or wherever you believe you're from. But I believe that there's a heavenly country that's waiting for us. I believe there's another world that's already in existence. And when God destroys this world, many of us will be taken to that new world. And we will start a new population. We will start a new world system. Okay? Some people call it the New World Order, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm actually talking about a new world that's already been made and set aside for us. So hopefully this study taught you something, let you know that the statutes, the judgments, the laws are prophetic. You have to read them and keep everything that you read in mind. These are prophecies. Okay? These are prophecies that you're reading about. We wouldn't understand what Moses was referring to, okay, if we didn't know the story of Abraham. This is why Moses said, they shall be cut off. That's what the circumcision is. He was cut off from his own flesh and blood. He bared his burden by being brought down into the land of Ham. The Bible actually says that Abraham went down into the land. Okay? So, as we see here, brothers and sisters, these things help us understand the stories in the Bible. And that's how you have to look at all the statutes, all the judgment, all the laws. These things were prophetic. Okay? So hopefully this study resonates with somebody. Please look at my other videos. I have a lot of information. I'm going to be making some more videos today. So please be looking out for them. And until next time, peace and blessings. Walk with him. Abram got his bags together, was ready for his mission. Took his wife and his nephew Lot with him, and the rest of his fam. His first stop was the land of Canaan. He passed through, that's when God appeared to Abram. Told him his descendants would have possession of the land. Abram built an altar and worshiped to his father. Continued on his mission, journeyed farther south. Came into a land of famine, journeyed out, headed for the land of Egypt. Before they entered, Abram told Sarah, listen, I know you're pretty, but in order for the Egyptians won't kill me, please tell them you're my sister instead of my wife, or they'll leave me dead. And Sarah did exactly what he said. They met the king who had gave Abram many things in detail: camels, donkeys, male and female, etc. In exchange he wanted to marry Sarah, but the Lord had plagued Pharaoh's household, all because of the lie that Sarah told. Pharaoh told Abram that he had to go. Take your wife and get to stepping. Abram took his wife, his bags, and the rest of his possessions. Had his men escort him out of Pharaoh's presence. On Abram's journey. Walk with him. Abram left from out of Egypt, very rich in livestock. Him and Lot had plenty herds and many flock. They made a stop by the altar he had made to rest and suggest him and Lot should go their separate ways. Just a wise move made for the better. Cause they couldn't sustain if they remained together. Abram told Lot, let there be no strife. If you go right, I go left. You go left, then I go right. They said the goodbyes and separated. Sodom and Gomorrah is where Lot had segregated. Abram went back to the land of Canaan, and once again, that's when God appeared to Abram on his journey. Walk with him. Abram ended up staying in Canaan, while Lot, on the other hand, went to Sodom and Gomorrah, where the men was exceedingly wicked.